Captain Lee Min-ho stared out the window of his ship, the UES Magellan, watching stars that no human had ever seen before. His hands gripped the metal railing as warning lights flashed red across the bridge. After 18 months traveling beyond Earth's solar system, they had finally found what they were looking for, a new world to call home. But they had also found something else, something that wasn't supposed to be there. "Captain, we've got 12 ships surrounding us," said Park Soo-jin from her navigation station. Her voice stayed calm, but Min-ho could hear the worry underneath. "They're big, really big." Min-ho nodded slowly. The alien ships looked like floating cities compared to their small colony vessel. Each one could probably hold 3 ships like the Magellan inside its belly. But size wasn't everything. Min-ho had learned that lesson during his years fighting pirates in the outer colonies around Mars. "What do they want?" he asked. Communications Officer Kim Jae-won looked up from his console, sweat beading on his forehead. "They're calling themselves the Sithari Trade Confederation. They want us to shut down our fusion drive immediately. They say it violates something called Galactic Safety Protocols." Min-ho almost laughed. Safety protocols. The Magellan had been flying for over a year without any problems. Their fusion drive was actually more efficient than anything Earth's best engineers had built before. Engineer Kim Tae-hyun had modified it during their long journey, pushing the power output higher while using less fuel. It was the kind of improvement that happened when humans refused to accept that something was good enough. "Tell them, Will." "Think about it," Min-ho said. "But first ask them why their safety protocols assume everyone stopped trying to make their technology better." The response came 30 seconds later, but not in words. Green energy beams lanced through space toward the Magellan. The first shots missed, but more were coming. "They're firing on us," Soo-jin shouted. "All hands, battle stations." Min-ho grabbed the ship's intercom. "This is the captain. We're under attack by unknown hostiles. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The bridge shook as the Magellan changed direction. But instead of running away like the aliens probably expected, Min-ho ordered something that made his crew stare at him like he'd lost his mind. "Take us straight at their flagship," he commanded. "Sir?" Soo-jin's eyes went wide. "That ship is twice our size. Their weapons are designed to hit ships that fly in straight lines and follow predictable patterns." Min-ho interrupted. "Tae-hyun, I need you to vent plasma from our mining equipment. Create a cloud between us and them." Down in engineering, Kim Tae-hyun's voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain, are you sure? If we push the drive this hard while venting plasma, we'll be running at dangerous levels." "How dangerous?" "Well, according to the safety manual, we shouldn't exceed 90% power output. But I've been tinkering with the system. I think we can hit 110% without blowing up." Min-ho grinned. This was exactly why he loved working with human engineers. They didn't just follow the manual, they rewrote it. "Do it!" The Magellan surged forward, faster than any ship its size should have been able to move. Behind them, a cloud of superheated plasma spread out like fog, blocking the alien sensors and making their targeting computers useless. "They're trying to lock onto us, but they can't get a clear reading," reported Weapons Officer Yoon Ha-na. "Their ships are moving into standard defensive formation." "Standard is exactly the problem," Min-ho muttered. He had studied alien technology during the flight, reading every piece of data Earth scientists had gathered from the few encounters with other species. All of them followed the same patterns. They built their ships the same way their ancestors had thousands of years ago. They used the same tactics. They never tried anything new. Humans were different. Humans looked at a perfectly good fusion drive and asked, "How can we make this better?" They took mining equipment and turned it into weapons. They flew straight at superior forces because sometimes the craziest plan was the only one that worked. The Magellan burst through the plasma cloud like a shark breaking the surface of an ocean. The alien flagship loomed ahead, its weapons trying desperately to track a target that was moving in ways their computers said were impossible. "Fire everything we've got," Min-ho ordered. The Magellan's weapons weren't designed for ship-to-ship combat. They were mining lasers, construction tools, and jury-rigged systems that Taehyun had cobbled together during their long journey. But they hit the alien ship's blind spots, areas that its designers had never bothered to protect because no one had ever attacked from those angles before. Explosions rippled across the flagship's hull. Warning lights flashed on alien bridges as damage reports flooded their systems. 3 more Sithari ships moved to intercept, but the Magellan was already gone, diving beneath their formation and using the disabled flagship as cover. "Captain," J1 called out, "the remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat. They're broadcasting on all frequencies that our tactics are theoretically impossible." Minho looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These weren't professional soldiers or veteran space pilots. They were colonists, engineers, and scientists who had volunteered to help humanity take its first real step into the galaxy. But when the moment came, they had fought like veterans. "Send them a message," he said. "Tell them that humanity specializes in making the impossible work. And if they want to learn how, they're welcome to ask nicely next time instead of shooting." First, as the alien fleet retreated, Minho realized they had done more than win a battle. They had announced to the galaxy that Earth's children weren't going to follow anyone else's rules. They were going to write their own. Admiral Choi Jae-sung stood in the command center of the USS Indomitable, watching death approach his home system. Through the massive viewport, 10,000 enemy ships stretched across space like a metal storm cloud. The Hegemony Council had finally decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist. "Final count confirms it, Admiral," reported Tactical Coordinator Yoon Hana, her voice steady despite the impossible odds. 10,147 vessels. They've brought everything they have." Jae-sung nodded slowly. In the 700 years since Captain Lee Minho first encountered alien ships, humanity had spread to over 200 star systems. They had traded with dozens of species, learned their languages, and even helped some of them solve problems their own governments couldn't handle. But apparently, being helpful wasn't enough. "What's our count?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. 200 ships, sir. Most of them are converted cargo haulers and patrol boats. Only about 50 were actually built for combat. The numbers were brutal. 50-1 odds against the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever assembled. Any sane commander would have started planning evacuation routes. But Jae-sung had spent his entire career studying how humans fought when the odds were impossible. They didn't run. They got creative. Status report from engineering, called Lieutenant Commander Oh Dong-min from the U.S. Resilient. "All ships. Report their modifications are complete. The gravity well generators are showing green across the board." Jae-sung smiled grimly. The gravity well generators were humanity's latest impossible invention. While other species had spent thousands of years perfecting energy weapons and particle beams, human scientists had asked a different question. What if we could make space itself fight for us? "Communications, open a channel to all ships," Jae-sung ordered. The faces of 200 ship captains appeared on screens around the command center. Some were old veterans like himself. Others were young officers who had never seen real combat. A few were civilian captains who had volunteered their cargo ships for the defense of Earth. All of them looked ready to die fighting. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jae-sung began, "today we face an enemy that wants to erase humanity from existence. They have 10,000 ships. We have 200. They have weapons designed by civilizations that ruled the galaxy when our ancestors were still learning to make fire. We have mining equipment, construction tools, and a bunch of modifications that shouldn't work according to their physics textbooks." Scattered laughter echoed across the communication channels. "But here's what they don't understand," Jae-sung continued. "For 7 centuries, we've been the species that looks at impossible problems and finds solutions. We don't follow their rules because their rules are designed to keep everyone weak and predictable. Today we show them what happens when you try to destroy people who refuse to stay destroyed." The Hegemony fleet began its approach, weapons charging and targeting systems locking onto human vessels. Their formation was perfect, a textbook example of overwhelming force applied with mathematical precision. Each ship knew exactly where it was supposed to be and what it was supposed to shoot. Execute Operation Madness, Jae-sung commanded. The Indomitable fired her gravity well generators, not at the enemy ships but at empty space between their formations. Suddenly, gravitational fields stronger than those around planets began pulling the alien vessels off course. Ships that had maintained perfect formation for thousands of years found themselves being dragged into collision courses with their own allies. Behind the flagship, converted cargo haulers opened their holds and released thousands of mining charges, explosives, designed to crack asteroids, now modified with proximity sensors and guidance systems that engineer Kim Tae-hyun's descendants had developed during the long years of peace. Enemy formation is breaking apart, reported Hana. Their commanders are trying to compensate, but they've never dealt with gravitational warfare before. The beautiful thing about the human battle plan wasn't just that it used unconventional weapons. It was that every part of it violated the enemy's basic assumptions about how space combat worked. Hegemony ships were designed to fight other ships that followed the same tactical doctrines they had used for millennia. They expected energy weapons fired in straight lines, predictable maneuvering patterns, and battles that followed established rules. Instead, they got cargo ships that split open like flowers, releasing swarms of modified mining drones. They got patrol boats that used their superior speed to target blind spots that hegemony designers had never bothered to protect. They got gravitational fields that turned their own formations into weapons against themselves. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Kang Yoo-jin, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 enemy vessels. They're asking for permission to withdraw from the battle." Already? Jae-sung checked the tactical display. The battle had been going for less than 2 hours. "What about their fleet commanders?" "That's the interesting part, sir. The fleet commanders are requesting detailed technical specifications for our gravity well weapons. They want to know how we've achieved theoretical impossibilities with what they're calling primitive human technology." Jae-sung laughed out loud. Even in the middle of a battle for humanity's survival, the aliens were still thinking like bureaucrats. They couldn't just accept that they were losing. They needed to understand why their superior technology was being beaten by species they considered inferior. "Tell them," Jae-sung said, "that humanity's secret weapon isn't any particular technology. It's our refusal to accept that anything is impossible. While their ancestors were writing rules about what couldn't be done, our ancestors were busy figuring out how to do it anyway." The Battle of Proxima Centauri ended 6 hours later with complete human victory. Not a single human ship was destroyed, while over 3,000 hegemony vessels were either captured, disabled, or forced to retreat. The galaxy's most powerful military force had been defeated by converted cargo haulers and mining equipment. But more importantly, every species in the galaxy received the same message. Humanity didn't just fight wars. They redefined what war could be. Captain Song Ji-woo walked through the corridors of the U.S. Liberator, passing crew members who looked nothing like the humans who had first left Earth 1,000 years ago. A tall, blue-skinned Sithari engineer worked alongside a human technician, both of them laughing at some shared joke. Nearby, a group of insectoid Vorthak soldiers practiced combat drills with human marines, their forearms moving in perfect coordination. This was what 3 centuries of peace had created, not just friendship between species, but something entirely new. Ships crewed by beings who had once been enemies, all working together under human command principles that emphasized one simple idea: if something could be improved, improve it. "Captain, we're approaching the core worlds," announced Science Officer Lim Bo-young from the bridge. Her voice carried excitement mixed with nervousness. After all these years, they were finally going to strike at the heart of hegemony power. Ji-woo nodded and took his place in the captain's chair. Through the viewports, he could see the other ships of the Liberation Armada, 40 vessels in total. But each one was unique. The Resilient Hope combined human adaptive hull plating with Sithari energy distribution systems. The Breaking Dawn used Vorthak biotechnology merged with human computer networks. The Star Dancer was entirely human-designed, but built using construction techniques learned from a dozen different species. "Status report from all ships," Ji-woo requested. Communications Officer Kang Yoo-jin's fingers danced across his console. All vessels report ready for combat. The Sithari crews are excited to finally strike back at their former oppressors. The Vorthak they're singing their battle songs. A low, haunting melody could be heard through the ship's communication systems. The Vorthak had been slaves for over 2,000 years before humanity arrived, and showed them that their master's technology wasn't as advanced as everyone believed. Now they were going home as free beings, ready to liberate their people who still lived under hegemony control. Captain, called sensor operator Han Woo-jin, the defense grid is powering up. I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. Ji-woo studied the tactical display. The core worlds were protected by automated defenses that had been built when the hegemony first conquered the galaxy. 3,000 years of constant upgrades and improvements, designed by the most advanced civilizations in known space. No attacking force had ever penetrated these defenses. Ever. Let me guess, Ji-woo said with a slight smile. The defense systems are designed to handle attacks from ships that follow standard hegemony tactical doctrine. Exactly, sir. Energy, weapons, predictable approach vectors, and conventional shield technologies. Perfect. Then they've never faced an attack from ships that don't exist in their tactical computers. The ancient defense grid opened fire with weapons that could have destroyed entire planets. Beams of pure energy lanced through space, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a moon. But instead of hitting solid targets, they struck ships that suddenly split apart into smaller vessels, their modular designs allowing them to separate and reform in completely new configurations. The Liberator herself demonstrated this perfectly. As defense beams targeted her main hull, sections detached and scattered in different directions. What had been one large ship became 7 smaller ones, each following a different flight path while maintaining communication through quantum-linked computer systems that the hegemony had never developed. Defense Grid is attempting to retarget, reported Bo Young, but its programming assumes ships maintain consistent mass and structure. It can't lock onto targets that keep changing their fundamental properties. This was the beauty of human engineering philosophy applied to multi-species cooperation. Each species contributed their greatest strengths, but under human operational doctrine that refused to accept limitations. Sithari hull plating that could reshape itself during combat. Vorthak biocomputers that adapted to new situations in real time. Human command systems that coordinated everything into tactics that no single species could have developed alone. Incoming transmission from the Dancing Storm, announced Yujin. Captain Veltar reports successful penetration of the outer defense perimeter. Her Vorthak crew is singing victory songs. Ji-woo couldn't help but grin. Captain Veltar had been a hegemony slave overseer just 5 years ago. Now she commanded a ship that used her people's biological technology to literally grow new weapons during battle, guided by human tactical flexibility that taught her to see every problem as an opportunity for innovation. All ships, execute, Phase 2, Ji-woo ordered. The Liberation Armada did something that should have been impossible. Instead of trying to destroy the defense grid, they began incorporating its attacks into their own energy systems. Human-designed power collectors absorbed the massive energy beams and redirected them to charge the fleet's weapons and shields. Captain, called engineering specialist Bae Mi-young from deep within the ship, we're actually gaining power from their attacks. The defense grid is making us stronger. This was perhaps humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not any specific technology, but a way of thinking that turned every challenge into an advantage. While other species had spent millennia learning to avoid the core world's defenses, humans had figured out how to make those defenses work for them. Defense Grid is showing signs of confusion, reported Woo Jin. Its targeting computers are requesting new programming updates to handle ships that use its own attacks as power sources. Time to target the control centers, Ji-woo announced. The 40 ships of the Liberation Armada reformed into a single massive vessel, their modular construction allowing them to combine into something that had never existed before. A ship built from the strengths of multiple species, controlled by human adaptability, and powered by the enemy's own weapons. 3 hours later, the impenetrable defenses of the core worlds lay in ruins. Automated systems that had protected hegemony power for 3,000 years had been defeated by ships that refused to fight the way they were supposed to fight. "Captain," Eugen reported, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from 17 hegemony worlds. They're requesting technical assistance in upgrading their defense systems using our impossible human technologies." Jiwoo looked around the bridge at his mixed-species crew. In their faces he saw the future of the galaxy. Not human dominance, but human principles applied by every species working together. The idea that any problem could be solved if you were willing to throw out the rulebook and build something better. The Liberation Armada had done more than win a battle. They had proven that freedom wasn't just about breaking chains, it was about building something new from the pieces. Commander An Soo-ho felt reality bend around him as the U.S. Transcendence shifted between dimensions, chasing enemies that shouldn't exist. Through the bridge windows, space looked wrong. Stars flickered in and out of existence, and distant galaxies appeared to be made of pure light instead of matter. "Phase alignment holding at 72%, reported engineering specialist Bae Mi-young, her voice echoing strangely as it traveled through both normal space and energy dimensions. "The hybrid consciousness interface is stable, but I'm getting some unusual readings from the crew quarters." Soo-ho nodded. Half his crew weren't entirely human anymore. They had volunteered for an experimental program that merged human consciousness with captured void collective technology. The process had been dangerous, painful, and according to every expert in the galaxy, completely impossible. But that had never stopped humans before. "How are our volunteers handling the transition?" he asked. "Better than expected, sir. Lieutenant Park Jun-ho reports that his energy form consciousness can now detect void collective movement patterns 3 hours before they manifest in normal space. Sergeant Kim Da-eun says she can feel their emotional states. Apparently, they're confused about why we're not dying." Soo-ho almost smiled. The void collective had awakened from their million-year sleep expecting to find the same galaxy they remembered, physical beings bound to matter-based technology, easily destroyed by energy weapons that simply passed through normal defenses. Instead, they had encountered humanity's latest impossible achievement. "Incoming void signature," announced sensor operator Han Woo-jin. "Large formation, approaching from dimensional vector 7 Alpha. "How large?" "At least 50 entities, sir. Each one the size of a battleship, but they're pure energy. No physical mass at all." Through the viewport, reality twisted as the void collective materialized. They looked like living lightning shaped into the form of massive spacecraft, crackling, with power that could dissolve matter at the molecular level. Their weapons had already destroyed 3 entire star systems, turning planets into clouds of scattered atoms. "All hands, prepare for dimensional combat," Soo-ho announced over the ship's communication system. "Remember, half of you exist in normal space, half in energy form. Use that advantage." The Transcendence was humanity's response to an enemy that conventional weapons couldn't touch. Built using technology that combined matter and energy states, the ship existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Her hull could become solid to deflect physical attacks, then shift to pure energy to avoid the Void Collective's dissolution weapons. But the real breakthrough wasn't the ship. It was her crew. Humans had done something that every species in the galaxy considered insane. They had voluntarily allowed alien technology to merge with their minds, creating hybrid beings that could think in both physical and energy states. "Void formation is targeting us," reported tactical analyst Shin Da-yoon. "They're attempting to phase shift our hull into energy dissolution." "Counterphase and return fire," Soo-ho ordered. What happened next would have been impossible to explain to anyone from the early days of human space travel. The Transcendence flickered between existing as a solid object and being pure energy, while her weapons fired beams that existed in both states simultaneously. The Void Collective found themselves facing an enemy that could match their dimensional manipulation abilities. Direct hit on their lead vessel, called Weapons Specialist Ryu Min-guk. But they're adapting faster than we expected. They're learning to counter our phase shifting. This was the problem with fighting an enemy made of pure consciousness. They could adapt their tactics in real time, learning from each exchange and developing countermeasures within minutes. Any conventional military force would have been overwhelmed, but humans had never been conventional. Suho to all hybrid crew members, the commander spoke into his communicator. We need you to do something that's never been attempted before. I need you to communicate directly with the void entities. Lieutenant Park Jun-ho's voice came back, but it sounded different, partly human, partly something else entirely. Sir, we're already sensing their thoughts. They're not trying to destroy us out of hatred. They're confused. They don't understand how matter-based beings can exist in energy states. Can you explain it to them? There was a long pause. We can try, but it might change us further. Once we open full communication with them, there's no going back to being purely human. Suho looked around his bridge at the crew members who had already sacrificed their original forms to give humanity a chance against this impossible enemy. Some of them flickered between solid and translucent, their consciousness existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They had paid a price that no previous generation of humans had been asked to pay. Do it, Suho decided, but stay connected to us. Don't let them absorb you completely. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. Instead of weapons and explosions, human-void hybrids began communicating directly with the enemy fleet, sharing concepts that had never been translated between matter and energy-based consciousness. Commander, reported systems analyst Kim Hyejin, the void entities are requesting a temporary ceasefire. They want to understand how we've achieved stable synthesis between matter and energy consciousness. They're not hostile, added Jun-ho, his voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to come from multiple dimensions. They woke up expecting to find the same galaxy they left, beings trapped in physical form, limited by matter-based thinking. They were trying to free everyone by converting them to pure energy. Suho felt a chill run down his spine. Free everyone? You mean they were trying to help? In their way, yes. They see physical existence as a prison. But now they're realizing that humans have found something they never considered, a way to exist in both states simultaneously, gaining the advantages of each without losing either. The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with something entirely new. The Void Collective and humanity began working together, sharing knowledge about consciousness, energy manipulation, and the fundamental nature of existence itself. Commander, reported Communications Officer Lee Sung-min, we're receiving messages from void entities across 17 star systems. They're requesting human advisors to help them understand matter-based civilizations. They want to learn our synthesis techniques instead of converting everyone to energy form. Suho realized they had done more than survive an encounter with beings of pure energy. They had turned potential destroyers into partners, proving once again that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was the willingness to find solutions that no one else had imagined possible. The synthesis wars had ended, but humanity's strangest alliance was just beginning. Captain Nam Hyun-woo stood in the observation deck of the U.S. Infinity, watching stars disappear one by one from the night sky. Each vanishing point of light represented an entire dimension being consumed by something that shouldn't exist. Entities from beyond their galaxy that didn't just destroy matter and energy, but erased the very concepts that allowed reality to function. Final evacuation reports are coming in, announced Operations Director Ko Soo-jin, her voice carrying the weight of coordinating the largest rescue operation in galactic history. 12 million inhabitants from 47 different species, all safely aboard. The city ship is operating at full capacity. Hyun-woo nodded, but his attention remained focused on the approaching threat. The Infinity wasn't just humanity's greatest achievement, it was the galaxy's last hope. Built over 2 centuries using knowledge gained from every species humanity had encountered, the ship existed as both vessel and living city, home to millions of beings who represented the best of galactic civilization. Status report from engineering, called Chief Technical Officer Ryu Min-guk from 17 levels below. All dimensional phase generators are online. We're currently existing across 23 different dimensional frequencies simultaneously. The ship's adaptive hull is responding perfectly to real-time molecular restructuring. The Infinity was everything humanity had learned about refusing to accept limitations. grown into something that challenged the basic laws of physics. Her hull could rebuild itself at the atomic level. Her engines drew power from dimensional rifts that technically didn't exist. Her crew included beings of pure energy working alongside matter-based life forms, all coordinated by human operational philosophy that treated impossible problems as interesting puzzles. "Captain," reported tactical analyst Shin Da-un, "the extragalactic entities have consumed the Andromeda approach vector. 3 entire dimensions have been deleted. They're not just destroying things, they're making it so those things never existed in the first place." Hyunwoo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. These weren't enemies they could fight with weapons or outmaneuver with tactics. These entities consumed the fundamental rules that allowed existence itself to function. They were anti-reality and they were heading straight for the Milky Way. "How long until they reach our galaxy?" he asked. "At current consumption rate, approximately 6 hours. But Captain, there's something else. We're detecting communication attempts from the entities. They seem to be trying to contact us." This was unexpected. Everything they had observed suggested these beings were mindless forces of destruction, consuming dimensions without thought or purpose. But if they were trying to communicate— "Put me through to the hybrid crew," Hyunwoo ordered. The Infinity's most unique feature wasn't her impossible technology, it was her crew. Humans who had merged with void collective consciousness. Sithari whose minds had been enhanced with human adaptive thinking. Vorthak whose biological computers had learned to process information across multiple dimensional states. Former enemies who had become family, all working together under principles that humanity had spread throughout the galaxy. "This is Lieutenant Commander Park Jinwoo speaking for the Hybrid Collective," came a voice that seemed to echo from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We're already attempting communication with the entities. What we're discovering is disturbing." "How so?" "They're not trying to destroy our galaxy, Captain. They're trying to save it. From their perspective, our entire reality is a disease, a malfunction in the cosmic order that's spreading chaos throughout the universe. They believe they're performing a necessary operation to restore proper functioning to existence itself." Hyunwoo absorbed this information. Humanity had faced many challenges over the past 3,000 years, but they had always involved opponents who could be reasoned with, outsmarted, or convinced to change their approach. How do you negotiate with beings who see your very existence as a cosmic infection? "Can we convince them they're wrong?" he asked. "We're trying, but their logic is based on principles that predate physical reality. They come from a time before matter and energy separated, when the universe was pure information. From their viewpoint, everything that has happened since then, the formation of galaxies, the evolution of life, the development of consciousness, is all just entropy run wild." Through the observation deck windows, Hyunwoo watched more stars vanish. Each disappearance represented billions of lives that had never existed, histories that had been erased from the timeline itself. But something about the pattern bothered him. "Wait," he said suddenly. "If they're trying to restore cosmic order, why are they moving so slowly? Beings that powerful could have consumed our entire galaxy in minutes." Communications Officer Lee Sung-min looked up from her console with excitement in her eyes. "Captain, I think they're studying us. The consumption rate has slowed down dramatically since we started attempting communication. They're curious about something." "About what?" Park Jin-woo's hybrid voice came back over the communication system, but this time it carried harmonics of wonder that seemed to come from multiple species simultaneously. "About us, Captain. About how matter-based beings achieved synthesis with energy consciousness. About how different species learned to work together instead of consuming each other. About how humans took a galaxy full of limitations and turned it into infinite possibilities." Hyunwoo realized what was happening. The extragalactic entities had spent eons consuming realities that followed predictable patterns. Universes where matter obeyed consistent laws, where energy flowed in expected directions, where consciousness developed along standard pathways. But they had never encountered anything like what humanity had created. "They want to understand," he said softly. "More than that," Jinwoo replied. They want to learn. For the first time in their existence, they've found a reality that's creating new possibilities instead of just following old patterns. They're beginning to think that maybe our cosmic disease is actually evolution. What followed wasn't a battle for survival, but something unprecedented in galactic history. The U.S. infinity became a meeting place between realities, where beings who consumed dimensions learned from beings who expanded them. The ship's impossible architecture provided neutral ground where entities of pure information could interact safely with matter-based consciousness. "Captain," reported Sujin 6 hours later, "the extragalactic entities are requesting permanent, cultural exchange programs. They want to establish research stations throughout our galaxy to study how our chaos creates what they're calling beneficial impossibilities." Hyunwoo looked around the observation deck at representatives from every species humanity had encountered over 3 millennia, beings who had once been enemies, slaves, or strangers, now working together to teach cosmic entities that destruction wasn't the only path to order. "Approved," he said, "and tell them that if they really want to understand human thinking, they should be prepared for their entire worldview to get turned upside down. We specialize in making the impossible work." The Infinity continued her eternal voyage, no longer fleeing from cosmic destruction, but carrying forward humanity's greatest gift to the universe, the belief that any limitation could be overcome, if you were willing to build something that shouldn't exist and make it work anyway. Somewhere in the ship's vast corridors, human children played with beings of pure energy, learning from each other that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had ever imagined possible.